So today we're jumping right into a really powerful chapter from the Gospel of Matthew. And it asks a question that gets to the very heart of faith. What does it actually mean to honor God? Is it all about following the external rules, or is it about what's going on inside our hearts? We're going to see how a few intense encounters really lay out the answer.
And this is the big question, isn't it? It's the one Jesus puts right in front of the religious leaders of his day, and honestly, it's just as relevant for us right now. Let's dig in and see how this whole story unfolds, because it starts with a pretty direct challenge.
All right, so our story kicks off with a super tense confrontation. I want you to picture this. You've got this formal group of Pharisees and scribes, the religious big shots, and they've traveled all the way from Jerusalem, the center of power, just to challenge Jesus. And the specific thing they accuse him of, well, that's what makes this so revealing.
Now listen really carefully to what they're saying. They don't pull out a quote from God's written law. No. Instead, they point to the tradition of the elders. And what's that? It's basically their own collection of man-made rules and interpretations. This whole hand-washing ritual wasn't actually a command from God. It was their own invention.
But Jesus, he doesn't even get into a debate about washing hands. That's not the point. He immediately flips the script on them. He turns their own accusation right back at them to expose a much, much bigger problem.
And this is where we get to the real heart of the matter. Jesus is about to show them that their obsession with their own traditions wasn't just some harmless add-on to God's law, it was actually causing them to break it.
Jesus gives this absolutely stunning example. He says, look, God's law in Exodus 20:12 is crystal clear. Honor your father and your mother. Simple enough, right? But they had this little tradition, this loophole called korban. It allowed someone to declare their money or property a gift to God. And get this, they taught that this religious vow meant you were off the hook for financially taking care of your aging parents. They were using a man-made rule to completely sidestep a direct command from God.
So, here's the crucial point, the real gut punch. Their traditions weren't just extra stuff. Jesus says they had nullified, basically canceled out or invalidated the actual word of God. Their human rules had become more important than God's commands.
And then Jesus just calls it what it is, hypocrisy. He quotes directly from the prophet Isaiah, from chapter 29, just to show them, hey, this is not a new problem. This is the age-old trap of just going through the religious motions, saying all the right things, while your heart is a million miles away from God. Your worship, he tells them, is totally empty.
Okay, so after dealing with the leaders, Jesus turns this whole thing into a teaching moment for everybody. He calls the crowd over to explain something so radical about spiritual purity that it completely flips the entire religious system of the day on its head. I mean, can you imagine hearing this? This was a shocking statement. In a culture totally obsessed with what you could and couldn't eat, with all these rules for ritual cleanliness, Jesus just comes out and says that what you eat or whether your hands are clean has nothing to do with what makes you spiritually unclean or defiled. He then pulls his disciples aside and breaks it down for them. The real source of defilement? It's not external, it's internal. It's our words and our actions, the things that show what's really going on inside us. That's what really matters. The problem is always in the heart.
And just so we're clear, when the Bible talks about the heart, it's not just talking about our emotions. It means the very core of who we are. It's like the control center for our thoughts, our will, our deepest intentions. It's our true inner self.
And Jesus gets super specific about what comes from a defiled heart. We're not talking about abstract ideas here. He says, "For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander." See? These are the things that truly make a person unclean, and every single one of them starts from within.
So, if a corrupt heart is the problem, what does a true heart of faith actually look like? Well, in a really dramatic shift, Matthew is about to show us. He gives us this powerful, real-world example, and it comes from the most unlikely person you could possibly imagine. So Jesus leaves Israel and heads into Gentile territory. And it's here that a Canaanite woman comes up to him. I mean, by every single standard of that time, she is a total outsider. She's a woman, she's a Gentile, and she's a Canaanite, an ancient enemy of Israel. She has every reason to be ignored. But just look at her plea. Yeah, it's desperate, but it is also packed with faith. She calls Jesus Lord and Son of David, which is a very specific Jewish title for the Messiah. Even though she's an outsider, she somehow knows exactly who he is. Now at first, Jesus seems to brush her off. He says his main mission is to the people of Israel, but this isn't a final no, it's a test. He's actually drawing out the depth of her faith for everyone to see.
Then the test gets even tougher. He uses this common, pretty sharp analogy. Israel are the children at the table, and Gentiles are the dogs. Now, the Greek word he uses here is more like little house dogs or puppies, not wild street dogs, which softens it a tiny bit, but it's still a really stark line he's drawing.
And her response is just incredible. She doesn't get offended. She doesn't argue. She humbly accepts his analogy and then brilliantly finds her place inside of it. She agrees, yes, Lord, and then makes her point. Even the little house dogs get to eat the scraps that fall from the table. She knows that even a crumb of his power is more than enough.
Her humble, persistent faith totally pays off. Jesus just commends her, saying, "O woman, great is your faith." Her faith, which came from a desperate, humble heart, not from religious tradition, was exactly what he was looking for. And just like that, her daughter was healed instantly.
So you have this huge contrast, right? The religious insiders with all their empty traditions on one side, and the Gentile outsider with her amazing faith on the other. So what does this mean for us today? Let's try and boil these stories down into a few practical takeaways.
Okay, first, examine your traditions. The things you do, maybe out of habit or religious duty, are they actually bringing you closer to God's heart, or have they just become a substitute for a real relationship? Second, guard your heart. Always remember, Jesus is teaching that true purity and defilement start on the inside, so we got to focus on our motives, our thoughts. And third, persist in faith. That woman's story teaches us to come to God with humility and just a relentless trust, believing that even a crumb of His grace is more than enough. And that leaves us with one last thing to really think about. You know, the Pharisees used their traditions to cancel out God's command to honor their parents. That's a pretty sobering warning. So the question for us is this: what seemingly small tradition or religious habit in our own lives might just be getting in the way of what truly matters, having a heart that is actually close to God?